today? Yeah, did you do any meditating today? See any squirrels in the backyard? What do you think of Frank? Want to say hello to everybody before you go back? Say hello to everybody. That's good. Oh, you want to go back to sleep now? Okay. Thanks for being on the show. I want to show how you meditate. You ready to meditate? Is that how you do it? Okay, welcome. And we're starting something new. We have gone through Genesis from the point of Adam up to the point of Jacob, and now we're leaving Genesis for a brief time and moving to Exodus. Okay? And we're going to introduce you to Moses. We'll introduce you to Moses. It's on page 48 in those little Bibles. What I will try to convey to you, and you deal with it as you can, is a proposition, a thesis, which is the same, which says that there never was such a person as Moses. That's a little radical departure from accepted traditional thought. There never was such a person. And what I will introduce to you is the fact that this Moses becomes the child impulse inside of you that grows in stature and then leads you from the torments of the left hemisphere of Egypt to the promised land, across the emotional churning Red Sea of your own emotions, to the point of the promised land of the right side. Now, there's two things that we have to understand, and let's look for documentation again, because for me to offer an opinion to you is a rather silly thing to do, and unfortunately, in all forms of religious and spiritual teaching, most of the work that is given out are opinions, especially this bizarre stuff that we read about how men have to exert themselves and, beat up on women again. Get back to the good old days, when things were quiet, when we had all the good jobs and all this stuff. Okay, I just lost my train of thought, so here we go. In order to document our right to take a position which is radical and departs from that which is the accepted norm of Moses being our leader, there are two things I want you to look at. Page 953, for one, you've seen it 1,000 times, but in it the Apostle Paul speaks of the Old Testament and the writings of the Old Testament, and in Galatians chapter 4 and verse 24, defining this Old Testament, he says, which things are an allegory. Okay? That's important, and then you should really look. Whenever you get into reading a Bible, not only should you have a Gaskell's with you, but you should also have a dictionary. Most people have any idea what that word means. Then they'll read it and say, which things are an allegory? And, I guess the average person would say, gee, this must be some kind of spiritual thing. Get into a dictionary and look up the word allegory, and you'll see that an allegory is a statement that uses names of people and places as symbols to give a deep spiritual meaning. So, which things are an allegory? But now there's something specific that Paul says about this entity called Moses. You'll find that on page 944, 2 Corinthians, and I would like you to look at it and think for a minute, because I'm going to take some liberties with this identity of Moses, as I told you, and you have to be able to say, well, this is where he gets the idea to do this. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 13. And not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children, it's on page 944, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 13. And not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look to the end of that which is abolished. That which is abolished is that which is legalism, the Bible, the law, and so forth. The fact that he put a veil over his face means that he could not be recognized. He could not be seen. To this day, he's not recognized. He's not seen. Okay. Now, let's go with that. Verse 14, but their minds, what was blinded? Their minds were blinded, for until this day remains that same veil untaken away in the reading of the Old Testament. You see that? That same veil. And that veil is called allegory, symbolism, numerology, proverb. And that still, to this day, is there, so that when people read Moses, they can't see him. They don't know who they're looking at. They don't realize until the veil is taken away that they're looking at themselves. Moses is not another man who roamed the desert. Moses is a description of your mind. But until that veil is taken away, you'll never see it. Watch what it says in verse 14. Which veil is done away in Christ? What did Christ teach you? The kingdom is within you. Practice the single eye. Enter within yourself, etc., etc. Look at verse 15. But even unto this day, when Moses is read, the veil is upon their heart. You're not seeing him. Are you willing to sacrifice your tradition and all the violence and all the rape and all the drugs and all the competition and all the separation and all the bombing and all the destruction of our planet and the violence against women and the violence against children and the violence against animals to finally take the veil off and see? That's my message. Are you willing to do it? And you know what? 90% of the people say, no, we want to leave the veil in front of. We don't want to say. Because when they see, they look at themselves. And when you look at yourself, you begin to see, gee, I have a responsibility. I have a part to play in this. Watch this. Verse 16. Nevertheless, when it shall turn to the Lord, the veil shall be taken away. Verse 17. The Lord is that Spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. In other words, you want to read this? You begin to read it spiritually and not literally, and the veil will come away, and you'll see Moses is not some man running around with a white beard in the desert. Moses is you. The child who must be born within you. If you're to be led out of all of the craziness of this earth and its religions, to that place which is the holy place, the right hemisphere, the right side, the holy side that is deep within you, where Jehoshua, Jesus the Christ, said it is. Page 48, Exodus chapter 2 and verse 1. Page 48, Exodus chapter 2 and verse 1. And the first thing that is told us here is that chapter 2, verse 1 of Exodus, and there went a man of the house of Levi who took a wife, the daughter of Levi. Okay?
47.
Page 47. That's exactly what I said. Do you want to look at it? The wife is of Levi. The husband is of Levi. Okay? And that sets the stage. Remember, I'm not here to tell you about a story of people who lived in the desert thousands of years ago. I could care less about people who lived in the desert thousands of years ago. I care about the people who were starving to death and killing each other in 1994. So we're not talking. The Bible does not have time to recant history stories. If you want to find out history stories, go to the library and get a history book. If you want to read drama, go to the movies and watch a drama. If you want to understand spirit, pick up a Bible. That's the difficult thing to get people to understand. You're not reading something that's written in Pittsburgh. You're reading something that was written by Eastern mystics. And I'll tell you where this stuff comes from. And I'll prove to you where this stuff comes from. This stuff comes from Egyptian mystics. Egyptian mystics and the people of the East. You know, one of the things they'll tell you to do when you come down here, stay away. They get into Eastern religions. There is nothing in this Bible that did not come from Eastern religion. Absolutely nothing. Okay. A man of Levi, a daughter of Levi, she bears a son. The son is that which we will call Moses. All right. Now, Levi is the priestly class in you. It is the higher energy that obeys spiritual direction. If you are here because you are listening deep within yourself to spiritual direction that's coming from that which was symbolically called Levi, that will direct you to do something. If you go into this meditation that we were talking about, the child will be born within you. The child will be born within you, and the child will eventually lead your consciousness out of the bondage of the lower mind with all of its guilt, with all of its fear, with all of its sickness, with all of its hate and all of its anger and all of its fighting and all of its abuse, lead you out of that lower mind into the divine promised land of the right side, the right hemisphere, the creative side, the God side of the mind. It is a form of Christ, what we're looking at here. Though the virgin is not used in this particular story, there is a birth or obedience to spiritual direction. Now, what we see here is that in the allegorical part of this story, the law in Egypt was that there was no more Jewish children to be born. Okay. Now, first of all, remember what Paul said. A Jew is not one outwardly. A Jew is one inwardly. And that means he who dwells in that which was the tribe of Judah at the east side of the right hemisphere of the brain is a Jew. A Jew is one inwardly who has cut himself away or circumcised himself away from all of the things of the earth, all of the things of religion, all of the lower things. And to this day, the religions of the world say there are no more Jews to be born. We'll take care of instructing you. We'll take care of guiding you. And so what happens in the myth here, in the story that we're reading, the fact that there are no more Jews to be born sets us up for another encounter with the mystical number 3. Okay? That number 3 in mysticism means new life. It means resurrection. I'll tell you why. It comes from astrology. The word actually, it freaks people out that are in religious circles. How could this come to astrology? I'll tell you why. On December the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, after the sun in the sky comes through the constellation Crux, excuse me, this is wrong. The constellation Crux is December the 21st. On December the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, the sun sits in the bowels of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. It's called the winter solstice. That's right. On December the 25th, the sun resurrects out of the tomb of the winter solstice and is reborn. That number 3 then becomes the number for new life for one reason and one reason only, because astrologically the sun is entombed in the bowels of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. After the sun is crucified on the cross on December the 21st, it goes into the tomb of the winter solstice and then resurrects after 3 days and 3 nights on December the 25th. Therefore, you have the Jehoshua or Jesus story in which he is crucified and goes into the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. You have the Jonah story in which he is swallowed by a whale and goes into the whale 3 days and 3 nights. Now you have this story here on page 48 of Exodus. We have the birth of Moses, and it says in verse 2, "And the woman conceived," that's Moses' mother, "and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him."
3 months.
Right, exactly. It's the same exact thing. It is the sun hiding itself from you during the winter solstice. The sun is on its way back down now, as you know, for the crucifixion. In September, next month, the sun starts its trajectory again out of the constellation Virgo. It is conceived of a virgin. And then it will come down, go through the cross on December the 21st, be entombed 3 days and 3 nights, and then resurrect to a new life, being born again on December the 25th. So here we have the child that is going to be born in you. 3 months, it is hidden, all right? You hide an experience, which is the number 3. It is new life as you experience the inner darkness of meditation. When you come to meditation, and this is what this is all about. You come to meditation, you sit, you enter within yourself, you are hiding yourself. You are hiding from yourself. You are hiding all of those things that are the dark side, and you are hiding deep within yourself so that you can rise out of all of that and be born anew. And that's what this hiding in 3 months and new life and all is concerned. Nothing whatsoever that was written in the Bible did not first happen in the stars. The whole Bible was written in the stars and written in the universe before anybody put it on a piece of paper. Okay, in Exodus chapter 2, verse 3, we come to another story that's famous that we've covered, and that is the story of Noah and the ark. We have a very similar type of story to Noah, which is the ark story, which is also baptism. They're all part and parcel of the same thing. Exodus chapter 2, verse 3, and when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child there, laid it in the flags by the river's bank. That thing that's called flags, or that's like saltwater grass, okay? Now, this is the beginning of the ark story. That name Moses means drawn out. This is very important. I want to take a little bit of time with it so that you understand. This is what is within you. It is drawn out. The name means drawn out. It is drawn out of the water. Okay? This is where it comes from. The object or subject of water into the ancient mystics had a cleansing effect and was considered then mystically, spiritually, to be a symbol of that which cleanses first, and so that we can rise up into higher realms. The Greeks put it together beautifully, and they constructed the context of the human mind, which was earth, which is the lower mind that you use every day, water, which is the inner spiritual truth. The third then would be air, which is the realm above the thoughts of the mind. The next was fire, which is the spirit. And then the renewed mind. And that is consistent in every culture. There is different symbols, but this one is in the Greek symbolism, which went very close to the ancient. So you take that which is your mind, you expose it to the inner truth, which is the second level of consciousness, which is water. You rise out of that inner truth, and you rise up into the air. The air is the third stage of human consciousness, and it says in the Bible in Thessalonians, we will rise together and meet Jesus in the air. That's the third stage of the mind. Then you rise up into the fourth stage, which is the spiritual stage, when you're in your meditation, which is fire. If you remember, it says in the Bible that John said, I will baptize you with water. In other words, I will tell you the truth to the lower aspects of your mind, but there will be one who will come and baptize you with fire and the Holy Ghost, which is the Christ, which is the fourth aspect, and then the mind becomes renewed. So now, interestingly, our little Moses takes the earth, they take the child, the physical aspect, which is your mind, you put it into number 3, or you hide it 3 months, whatever, you go into meditation, and then the child is born out of the water, which is the truth. Jesus goes into John, is born out of the water. Jonah goes into the whale, is born out of the water. All is born out of the water. Okay, everything comes out of the water. In other words, everything comes out of the truth. So in this particular stage here, the second stage of consciousness is what will give you. See, there's a part of you in your mind which is known as the Moses factor. That's the part that's going to rescue you from all of your trials and all of your guilt and all of your fear and all of your bondages, okay? In order for this child to rescue you, it must be drawn out. Drawn out of what? That impulse. You must take your mind, you must enter into the water, which is the inner truth, through meditation, so that Moses can be drawn out of the water, be brought up into the air, and then receive upwards. Okay. Remember in John chapter 3, verse 5, Jehoshua, Jesus said something, and it's important for you to understand. Unless a man be born of water, that's the second stage of consciousness, and spirit, which is the fourth stage, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Where did Jesus say the kingdom of God was? Within you. Cast your net to the right side. He's saying there is no way. So what do? Instead of sitting in meditation, taking the mind to water, which is the second stage, rising up through the air, which is the third stage, to the fourth stage, we take people to the Bamber Lake or to the Barnegat Bay and stick our head in water. I mean, folks, believe me, that's our tradition. This is what we do, that there is a God somewhere on some far distant planet. He's always on some planet far away. You know why they put him on a planet far away? So they don't have to contend with what he is. They put him on a planet far away and then say, stick your head in the water. He gets all turned on by that kind of stuff, and he'll really love you. And that's what they do. Here they'll take little babies and will spill their water. They have no idea that this is all mystical and it is all Greek mythology, and it simply says that you must take the earth, which is the head, you must submit it to the truth, and then it must rise into the third stage of consciousness, which is the air. And then it will be touched by the fire, which is all mental, it's all electricity within the mind. And that's what happens here. See? Now, Exodus chapter 2, verse 5. And the daughter, page 48 again. The daughter, what? 47. That's what I said. Here, change that. Okay. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked by her side. When she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. The daughter of Pharaoh comes. She sees this. Now, here's what we've got as far as we get to this point. Remember, this is inside of you. This development is starting to happen inside of you. Pharaoh represents that which is the leading part of your ego, the lower mind. Pharaoh is the part of your mind that this new child that is being born within you will later convince to set you free. Okay? Unless this little child is born inside of you, there will nobody inside of you to convince the Pharaoh to set you free. And how he does this is not unlike Jacob. There's going to be a lot of chicanery and a lot of deceiving going on, because when we deal with our mind, that's what we have to do. Now, Pharaoh's daughter sees the little child. And Pharaoh's daughter simply is the desires of the emotions of the ego. The desire, you're sitting here listening to me because you have a desire. Your emotional nature has a desire to see something better, to see some life. Even though your ego will fight to stop you from accomplishing this, you want to see it. So Pharaoh will represent your mind, but Pharaoh will be the obstructor later, that when this little child is born through you through meditation, the child will start to work against Pharaoh to get you out of there. Now, the daughter of Pharaoh is also raises itself, a feminine aspect. Is not only emotional, it's also spiritual. Always will discover the child in the water. Always. And that's part of the truth here. See? Now, as it says in Exodus 2, verse 6 to Exodus 2:9, when she opened, she saw the child, and she had compassion on him, one of the Hebrew children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse?" Who said this? Then said his sister. It just happens that little Moses' sister is standing there when Pharaoh's daughter picks the kid out of the water. Your spirit now is there. See, here it says, "Shall I go and call you a nurse?" And Pharaoh's daughter in verse 6 says, "Yes." And the maid went and called the child's mother. Who did the maid, who did the sister go to get? Moses' mother. And Moses' mother comes, and Pharaoh's daughter says to Moses' mother in verse 9, "Take this child and nurse it for me." And the woman took the child and nursed it. This is extremely important, and I want you to look at the mystical implications of this, okay? A child is being born within you. The child is born out of your meditation. The child is that which is going to grow in strength and lead you into the promised land of the right hemisphere. But at this early stage, the child cannot deal with the emotional nature and the ego. It is too small. It is too weak. It needs to be nursed. It needs to be suckled. And only that which is the mother, that which is the divine mother, can nurse it. And so here the story says, the little child Moses is given over by the emotions, and it winds up back with its own mother, where it is going to be nursed, it is going to be suckled, it is going to be fed the divine milk in meditation, so that it can raise itself in stature and then grow in stature and be viable. Do you understand? So it winds up back to its mother. In other words, when you start your meditation, stay away from the religious people, stay away from the New Age people, stay away from everybody that's going to tell you what to do and how to do it and all of that stuff, because you've got to stay with Mother. And Mother is the divine spirit within you. And as you enter into your meditation, Mother will feed you. Mother will feed you the milk of her breast, which is the divine impulses which will come into you. And then the child which is being born within you out of the water of the truth of the second stage of consciousness will rise up into the air. Okay. Now, it says in verse 10, "And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So here now, the child within you is strong. The spiritual mother within you can release it, and she gives it over to the emotional nature. And now you can contend with that which is the emotions, that you can contend with that which is the mind, because the child has grown in strength within you. So, and it says he's called Moses because he's drawn out of the water, and I showed you exactly what that means. There's a very important point when considering Moses, and this is what a lot of people, and a lot of the prejudice, and a lot of the fighting, and a lot of the prejudice against the people of Iraq, the people of Iran, the people of Egypt, all of these things, because you feel that you have a traditional Christian Judeo basis, and so you consider the people of the East to be false religions. I'm not saying you, I'm talking of a generalized Jew. And nothing could be further from the truth, okay? Remember something, the law was not written by this mythical Moses. It was written in bondage in Babylon, which is Iraq, okay, by a guy named Ezra. That is a historical, that is a fact. You can find it in any college, you can find it in any library. The only place you cannot find that truth is in church. See? Now, let me show you something. Go to page 409 in those little Bibles, and the rest of you go to the book of Ezra. Go to page 409, and the rest of you go to the book of Ezra. Okay? I got to find them up. Okay, I'm on 758 here. On page 409, I want you to look at Ezra chapter 7. All right? Now look at verse 21. Ezra chapter 7, verse 21. Artaxerxes, king of kings. Artaxerxes was the king of Babylon. That's the king of Iraq. It's no different than if you were talking of today. Who would it be? Saddam Hussein. That's who it would be. Okay? And if you would have taken this in 1994, it would say, and Saddam Hussein gave an order. King Artaxerxes, king of kings, unto Ezra the priest, a scribe of the law of God of heaven. I make a decree that all the people of Israel, blah, blah, and his priests and Levites, which are minded of their own free will, go up to Jerusalem with you, for as much as you are sent of the king, meaning Artaxerxes, King Hussein, to inquire concerning Jerusalem and according to the law which is in your hand. Okay? And it says there that if you look at verse 25, and you, Ezra, after the wisdom of your God that is in your hand, set magistrates and judges and so forth and so on, and whosoever, in verse 26, will not do the law of your God and the law of your king, let judgment be executed upon him. You're looking at a king who is a follower of Zoroastrianism, which was the religion of Iraq and Iran, who's making a decree. The law was written here in Iraq by Ezra. You take it to Jerusalem, and these people better pay attention to it. When it was time to build the temple, rebuild the temple, who was admonished in the Bible to rebuild the temple? King Cyrus. What was he king of? Persia. What is Persia? Iran. There would be no rebuilding of the temple if it wasn't for Iran. There would be no 10 Commandments and law if it wasn't for Iraq. And when Jesus was born, who came across the desert to herald him as king according to the myth? It was the Magi, which is the root of the word magician, which is the tribe of Magi of Zoroaster of Iran. There is not one thing that has to do with the temple, that has to do with the Bible or the law, or has to do with the setting up of Jesus as king that comes from Jews or comes from Christians. It all comes from what you would call now Muslims or the people of the East from Iraq and Iran. No different than the story of the Lady of Fatima. We couldn't even call her Maryland. We had to call her Lady of Fatima. Lady of Fatima is nothing more but the name of Muhammad's daughter. So either the law came from Iraq through Iran, or the law, you wanted to say, came from Moses. Okay? Let me show you something about the one we're talking about. Go to page 894. Acts chapter 7, page 894. Acts chapter 7, and let me show you. And as I speak this, you can start thinking of the White Brotherhood, the Mystic Lodge, and all of this ancient mysticism that came out of the temples and out of the pyramids of Egypt. Acts chapter 7 and verse 22. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in word and deed. Not learned in all the wisdom of the Jews, not learned in all the wisdoms of the Christians or the Baptists or the Catholics or the Methodists. He was learned in the wisdom of the Egyptians. So if you want to be a traditionalist and say Moses wrote it, it was an Egyptian mind that wrote it. If you want to go to the truth, you'll find it was an Iraqi mind that wrote it. It had nothing to do with the Jews, had nothing to do with the Christians. And you know the sick part of it, you had to wait until how old you are to come into the basement of Vito's cellar and find out. Because there's not a church with a steeple standing that'll have the guts to tell you that. Not one. Not one. What is it? Where?
23.
Acts 7:23. And seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended him. We're going to that right now. Okay. Back to our story. The Moses-Christ aspect is revealed as the left and right hemisphere of the brain. And the mind thought subject you to violence, and this is going to answer what you're talking about right here, Al. Anger, and we're subject to these thoughts. So when Jesus or Jehoshua came along, what did he seek to do? He sought to destroy the violent hold against the people. Now, what is being said in Acts 7:23, go back to page 47, I guess it is. Exodus 2, and we're almost done with this, incidentally. Exodus 2 and verse 11, okay?
That's 48 now.
Page 48. And it came to pass when Moses was grown, he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. He spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew. He looked this way and that, and when he saw there was nobody around, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. He sees the burdens placed on the people. Within you, the Moses aspect, that which is the child has grown strong. He sees the burden of thought that comes down on you, that puts you into guilt, that puts you into fear, that puts you into the bondage of the system, and this meditation kills it out of you. And you're free. That's what that was talking about. Kills it out of you, and you're free. And if you look at Exodus chapter 2, verses 13, 14, and 15, we see a consistency in the story of the rebellion on the part of his own. In chapter 13, it says, he went out the second day. 2 men of the Hebrews said to him, how come you killed that guy? And he said, who made you a prince and a judge over us? And you tend to kill me as you killed the Egyptians? And Moses said, this thing is now known. And when Pharaoh heard about it, he set out to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh. In other words, Moses saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He speaks to them. They come against him, and this gets to Pharaoh, and Moses has to flee into the wilderness. And it's just like where it says in John 1:11 of Jesus, he came unto his own, and his own did not recognize him. This is the aspect that's born unto you. It strives with your mind, but not only with that which is the traditional concepts of religion and so forth. Your own family will turn against you and say, who the hell do you think you are coming in here with this stuff? Where did you get this stuff? What right do you have to come in and try to destroy all of the things that we were born with? I mean, I was born this way. Your grandmother was born this way. Your grandmother's grandmother was born this way. They're all upstanding. They may be a little drunk, but they're all upstanding people, and they were all born this way. And here you come along, and who gives you the right to do this? And you know what happens? And then your ego will come against you. Your mind will come against you. You'll start doubting yourself. You'll start being, my Jesus, maybe, what am I saying? And everybody's mad at me. Everybody's coming against me. And what will you have to do? The child within you will have to head for the wilderness of meditation and up into the mountains to be safe. Huh? So we spend time in the wilderness of meditation as we prepare for our calling. And that's where you'll confront the burning bush. But before you confront the burning bush, which is deep within the center of your consciousness, your meditation deepens and you begin to activate that which is called the sleeping serpent of Kundalini, which enters up the 7 chakras. And now you will confront that, because this is the point. See what? You've grown. The child was born out of the water of the truth. It was raised, it come upward, and now it starts struggling with the carnal mind, and that which is tradition comes against it, that which is family comes against it. The child within you goes back into the wilderness, where it nurtures itself into the mountains, and this is what it sees. In Exodus chapter 2, look at verse 16, and this is where we'll come in 2 weeks to continue this. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters. And the priest of Midian and the 7 daughters is when Moses, or the child within you, the energy within you, meets face to face with Kundalini. But the 7 daughters are the 7 chakras and the 7 nerve centers. And the child must now contend with them as it rises up to the mountain. And we'll continue with that. Moses, you, the evolution, the strength, to the mountain, the confrontation, the march across the sea, to the promised land. Free at last, free at last. You know, you remember the man, the black man that stood, the Martin Luther King? Because it says in this book that Moses went to the mountaintop to see the promised land because he couldn't go in, and the next day he was dead. And the man, Martin Luther King, came to the platform and he said, I've been to the mountain. I can't go in with you to the promised land. And the next day he was dead, because he was who he was. And you are who you are when you activate that which is within you. And it will lead people as he led people. It will turn things, nations and cities and countries upside down and slam down all of their violence and discriminations, because it is the child born out of the water, risen up to the mountain to confront the 7 daughters of the priest of Midian, the burning bush, Pharaoh, lifting himself up and seeing the Red Sea of the emotional nature split apart and race across to the promised land flowing with milk and honey. That's where we go with the story. Inside of you, it all happens. Because it never happened outside. It happens inside. Thank you for sharing this time. It was